the idea is behind these evenings. We're going to have 4 of them, one in each of the 4 months, September, October, November, and December. If you go to the website, you'll get the exact dates in each of the months. They aim to be the first or second Tuesday, depending on what other scheduling problems there are. But for those of you that are interested, in addition to tonight, October 12, November 9, and December 7. We thought that December 7 was good because it coincided with something nasty at Pearl Harbor. The idea here is to do 3 things. One, to give you a kind of running update on what is going on with the global economic crisis, so that there is an independent, critical source of analysis and insight that you can use to balance off what you get in the media, from Fox News at one end to Paul Krugman at the other, and help you make your own judgments by having an ongoing way for you to hear what another perspective on this crisis is. The second goal is to talk in some depth, that's my job, about a number of particular issues that are shaping and being shaped by the crisis, so that there's a more in-depth understanding of some of the underlying mechanisms that produce and sustain a crisis of this extraordinary magnitude, and I'm going to come back to that in a minute. And the third and final function is for me to be a resource for you. In other words, to leave time for you to ask questions about whatever either I present or that you've encountered in your own thinking or reading about the crisis, or in your personal life as it plays out in shaping that life. And I will try to answer those questions, you know, to ask the economist kind of moment, and to make it useful to you and to shape some of the conversation around the things that interest you, which are probably different from those that shape my presentation. Okay, so that's the idea, and then we will do that each month. I'll focus on different specifics to go into in depth each of the 4 months, so that'll be different. The update will be appropriate to what has happened each month. And then the questions will be up to you to pose and take the conversation where it will be useful to you. So today, let's start with a kind of general update and then go into some of these more particular issues. We are about to enter, or complete rather, the 3rd year of this crisis. The official starting date, according to that little strange agency that probably few of you ever heard of, called the National Bureau of Economic Research, the NBER. If you're an economist, you deal with their publications and their research all the time, but if you're not, you would have never heard of it. They are actually charged with making the decision as to when a recession has begun in the United States and when it is over. So they decided that it began in December of 2007. Now this is a very peculiar institution, and that's a very peculiar job, since an economic downturn is a very uneven event. It's different industries in different ways, different parts of the country in different times. So it's inherently a very difficult process. So don't fix too much attention on that month of December 07, but it is what everybody uses. Basically, we can say the autumn of 2007 is when things started to turn very ugly. Well, that means we're now finishing the 3rd year, 2008, 2009, 2010. And that already makes this crisis, this economic downturn, one of the worst in the last century. The greatest one to date, we don't know yet what this one is going to play out to be, but the worst one was the Great Depression of the 1930s. That began in 1929 and really didn't stop until 1940-41. So 10, 11, 12, depending on how you count, but a good decade. And despite everything that Franklin Roosevelt, the then president, did, which were very similar things to what Obama and Bush did this time, actually did some more things. We may come back to that if you're interested later. I can compare for you if you're interested what Roosevelt did in the 30s with what has been done so far, and you can then draw whatever inferences you might like to. We had another terrible one in the middle 1970s. Those of you that were around at that time know that, for example, the city of New York effectively declared bankruptcy. It was taken over by the state of New York, which became the budget control of the city because the city had ceased to be able to function as an economic entity. That's how severe it was, 1974 and 1975. We are now in an economic downturn that has lasted longer than that one. So we are surpassed the 74, 75 crisis. So lasting for 3 years of downturn like this makes this a doozy. And we are nowhere near out of it, as I'm going to show you in a minute. We have unemployment, just to give you again a few measures. Unemployment in December of 2007 in the United States was around 7 million people officially listed as unemployed, a percentage of about 5%. It zoomed up in 2008 and into early 2009, reaching about 15.5 million people unemployed, or a rate of double, 10%. And it's basically stayed there. There has been no recovery of any sort. In terms of unemployment, we remain at or close to 10%, depending on what you can. What has changed over the last year and a half has been a component of unemployment that is very interesting. The number of people out of work more than half a year, 27 weeks or more. That is now at about 45%, and that's extraordinarily unusual because it means also that we have a highly concentrated unemployment and that the social effects of unemployment, which are documented in 1,000 studies, unemployed people are more likely to get sick, unemployed people are more likely to have mental troubles, unemployed people have trouble in their family, I mean, you name it, unemployed people have more of it if it's bad. So the longer you're unemployed, of course, the more this problem multiplies. And so we have a very severe social impact of our unemployment. Not only is it at a record high of 10%, but it is a long-lived unemployment. So there's been no let-up in that, as you'll see in a couple of minutes when I do some of these numbers. Home foreclosures. We have had a record for a modern economic downturn of home foreclosures. That has to do with the fact that one of the places where this current crisis took off, where it began, where it kind of exploded first, was in the housing market. Because housing was such an important part of the 5 or 6 or 7 years building up to this collapse. Roughly 2001 to 2007 were a time when the entire American economy was being boosted, kept afloat. People kept their jobs because of the housing market. And the reason for that, just a moment's history, has to do with the fact that we had this absurd boom in the 80s and 90s. Absurd in a way I'm going to come back to in a few minutes, where the stock market took off in a way it never has before. People were working and money was being earned, and we had a stock market boom, the likes of which we never had before. Some of you remember, roughly 93 to 2000, those 7 years of the 1990s, we had a stock market run up the likes of which we've hardly ever seen before in American history or in any other stock market's history of an advanced industrial country. And that boom, like so typical in capitalism, blew itself out and exploded in the spring of the year 2000. In March of the year 2000, the stock market crashed. And the beauty of American media and the beauty of the American public is the ability to obliterate inconvenient facts from its history. I won't embarrass anyone here by asking you whether you understand that the stock market crashed early in the year 2000 and has never recovered. To give you an idea, the index, don't worry about what it means, but the index of the most important stock market, which is called the NASDAQ, N-A-S-D-A-Q, stood at 5,000 as a rough index of the level of the value of the stocks in March of the year 2000. Today it's half of that. It never recovered.